सुरुवात.
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. हरि ओम्. I have been a student of Upanishads. When I was very young, as a college student, I started Upanishads as a part of my syllabus. At that time, it was just a syllabus. As I grew up, as I started reading more and more, the Upanishads fascinated me more and more. So much they gave to me, and I started speaking about the Upanishads as a teacher. And the students and the general audience was also quite impressed by what Upanishads convey us, how our culture, how our social tradition is so deeply rooted in the Upanishads. When they realized this, they were quite very interested in studying Upanishads. As I started studying Upanishads more and more, one concept of the Upanishads quite attracted me, and that was the concept of Dhira. The Upanishads explain it as Dhiraha Purusha. Sometimes the word Purusha is missing, just Dhiraha appears. In a way, Dhiraha is an adjective in Sanskrit language, but Upanishads accept it as a masculine noun, and they speak about this Dhira, particularly uh, Kathopanishad and Mundakopanishad speak about this Dhira Purusha as the ideal seeker of the ultimate truth. He is the aspirant who is very much uh, interested in finding the ultimate truth, not just finding, he is burning with desire to realize that ultimate truth and immortalize it and bring it into their own life. That is what the seekers, which are termed by the word dhira in Upanishads, represent. Where do we find this dhira in the first place in the Upanishads? We find the term dhira used in Kathopanishad very frequently. Kathopanishad, the Upanishad lovers know that is an ancient Upanishad. There is a classification of Upanishads as per the major Upanishads and minor Upanishads, the ancient classical Upanishads and Navya new Upanishads. There are classifications. There are some Sannyasa Upanishads, there are some Vedanta Upanishads, but Kathopanishad belongs to the class of ancient classical Upanishads. It's a very popular Upanishad, and many thinkers in modern India are quite impressed and inspired by what Kathopanishad tries to convey through its chapters to us. As it is well known that Kathopanishad starts with the framework of a story of a young boy Nachiketa and his father Vajashravasa Gautama. His father Nachiketa is a young boy. I will tell the story briefly because it's a very well known story. And in this framework of the story, Nachiketas asks his father and challenges some actions done by his father in a sacrifice which is called Sarva Dakshina Yajna. It is a sacrifice in which the host of the sacrifice is supposed to donate everything. He has to offer everything that he possesses to the priests present there and to the other learned Brahmins. But Vajasravasa Gautama find out some loophole in that rule and gave away cows. In those days, cows was a prominent or major part of one's wealth. So he gave away cows which were of no use, which were very old, and which had ceased to yield milk. Nachiketa didn't like what his father was doing, because children have a very strong sense of right and wrong. Nachiketa is described as a Kumara. In some places, he is described as an 8-year-old boy. But he was not just arrogant or just inquisitive or just a naughty child. He was instilled with faith. Upanishad says, Shraddha Avivesha. Faith entered Nachiketas. And Nachiketa asked questions to his father, which his father didn't like. What did Nachiketa ask? Nachiketa asked, O father, to whom you are giving me? He meant thereby that the progeny is also the wealth of the father. So, as he is supposed to give all his wealth, he has to give his son also. But offering of son, wives, or other persons is prohibited in Sarvasva Dakshina Yaga. Only other wealth is to be given. So, if his father was to give the son, that was also wrong, and Nachiketa wanted to point out to his father that what he was offering as the dakshina in this sacrifice was also not proper. Uh, the child persisted, asked questions 3 times. Then his father got angry and said, Mrityave tva dadami, I give you to the king of death, the lord of death. So Nachiketa proceeded to Yamaloka, that is a famous part of the story, and stayed there at the doorstep, at the footsteps of the Yama's palace for 3 days without any food or water. When Yama came back, he was surprised to find the young guest which remained unattended. Means the servants or the wife of Yama wanted to serve the guest, but he refused because he said, I have been given to Yama and I don't know what Yama wants to do with me. So until Yama comes, I will not have anything. So Yama, in return to his predicament, offered 3 boons to Nachiketa. And as we know that Nachiketa, by the first boon, asked his father to be pacified. He asked that his father may be free from the anger that was burning in him, and he may sleep peacefully and understand and recognize Nachiketa when he goes back. Because Nachiketa had not died, he was not supposed to stay with Yama for long. So he asked by that boon. Then in the second boon, he asked for the spiritual practice that Yama himself had done, by which he was governing his world, his region, his loka, where there was no hunger, no thirst. It was a very good region which was free from the defects of the material earthly existence. Yama granted him the knowledge of the practice of Nachiketa Agni. He gave the practice of worshipping a particular fire, how to build up the Yajna Vedi for that fire, and how to worship, how to practice the Yajna. And in addition, he said, I give this fire your name. This will be named as Nachiketa Agni. People will know it as Nachiketa Agni. And as the third boon, when the time of third boon came, Nachiketa asked him that you please give me the knowledge what happens to the people after they die. Whether something or other remains or nothing remains, because there is a lot of discussion amongst the scholars. So I want to know the truth from you, because who else than the death is capable of sharing the secret of what happens after death, what remains, what doesn't remain. So this question was asked by Nachiketa, and he requested Yama to give this knowledge to him as his third boon. But Yama said that this is a very deep secret and profound knowledge. Even gods are not inquisitive about this knowledge. And how a young child like you would know this? Because the speaker of this knowledge is also very hard to find, and the listener is also very hard to find. And after listening to it, one who can grasp it, comprehend it, and realize it is even more rare, is rarer. That is what Yama said. But Nachiketa insisted that I want this knowledge only. I don't want anything else from you, O Yamaraja, O Mrityuraja, he said. So Yama tried to seduce him, lure him away by some enticing things. Yama offered him so many benefits, worldly benefits, a great kingdom of the world, a lot of wealth in the form of gold or chariots or wonderful lady servants to serve him, and a vast kingdom. All this was offered, many bejeweled things, all ornaments and hasti, elephants and chariots, all were offered by Yama to Nachiketa. And Yama tried to tell him that don't ask for this knowledge, in return, I will give it all this to you. But Nachiketa was of a very firm resolve. He was not seduced, he was not lured away by those things that Yama offered to him. Any common person would have been attracted to what Yama had offered. But Nachiketa didn't touch, Nachiketa didn't accept all those boons, and then he refused everything and wanted the knowledge which now we call Atmajnana, the knowledge about the ultimate truth, the knowledge about Atman. He asked. Then Yama was very, very pleased by Nachiketa and praised him with this term, Dhira. Nachiketa, you are Dhira, Yama says to him. And why he is Dhira? He says that there are two things in our life which are the very famous concepts of our Indian culture. That one is prayas, which is attractive, pleasant, and the other one is shreyas, which is permanently beneficial, everlastingly beneficial, that is superior, that is shreyas. So, whatever Yama offered to Nachiketa is prayas, but what Nachiketa was seeking was Shreyas. So, in life, all human beings face this. They encounter the prayers and they know what is Shreyas. But mostly people are susceptible and they fall prey to the attractions of prayers and they turn their back to prayers. Shreyas, that is what the condition of common people is there. So Yama says that preyascha, shreyascha, manushyametah तौ संपरित्य विविनिक्ति धीरः श्रेयो हि धीरो अभिप्रेयसो गृणीते प्रेयो मंदो योगक्षेमात् गृणीते. He says that in life human beings come across two things, preyas and shreyas. But dhiraha, the dhira person, the dhira seeker, the wise seeker, samparitya, then discerns between prayer and shreya, understands what is prayer and what is shreya, and then he separates them. He separates, sometimes prayers and shreyas are intermixed also. He separates prayers and shreyas, and then he selects Shreyaha Abhipreyaso. Over prayers, he selects Shreyas. That is the first qualification of Dhira. Dhira always selects Shreyas, ultimately benefit, ultimately eternally good, over the temporary good, attractive, pleasant thing. Prayers, though very attractive, though ultimately beneficial may not appear as attractive. It may not be apparently attractive. It is good for us, but only Dhira selects Shreya over Preya, and man, the dim-witted people, fall after succumb to prayers. That is what Yama first mentions the word Dhira, and he says Nachiketa is such a Dhira person. Being a young boy, age doesn't matter here. What does Shankaracharya have to say? As we know, Shankaracharya has written his commentary, his bhashya on all the Upanishads. So, while commenting on this verse of Kathopanishad, Shankaracharya gives a beautiful analogy, a wonderful analogy of a hamsa. He says, Ato hamsa iva ambhasa payaha तौ श्रेयः प्रेयः पदार्थो संपरिगम्य मनसा आलोच्य गुरुलाघवं विविनक्ति पृथक् करोति. Like a swan who can separate milk from the water. So like a hamsa, he can separate ambhasapaya, like separating milk from water. The person who can discriminate between shreyas and prayas and considering contemplating over it with his intellect, he decides Guru Laghavam, the superiority and inferiority between them, and so he decides what is of supreme significance, that is Guru, and what is of trifle significance is Laghu. So he Vivinakti, he discerns, he discriminates between them. That person is called Dhiro, Dhiman. Shankaracharya interprets it as Dhiman. What is Dhi? Dhi means Buddhi, intellect. So that is what Dhira is. He uses his intellect, he uses his reason, but for seeking the ultimate good, for seeking the ultimate truth. That is why Dhira is held in high regard in all the Upanishads. Now, the definition of Dhira is given by Yama. But how Nachiketa fits that definition? Yama goes on saying that you have abandoned everything which fell under the category of prayers, and you have sought only Shreyas. He says, Kamasya aptim jagatah pratyushtham kratoranantyam abhayasya param stomam mahadurugayam pratyushtham društva. It is very important. Društva dhiro nachiketah atyasrakshi. O Nachiketa, who looked at all those things that I offered to you, the great fame, even the place, a secure place in heaven, all that, and the well settled position in the world, everything, you just not abandon without thinking. Društva, you thought over them and you understood their non-eternality, their fickleness, and društva, having thinking, having contemplating on it, you have abandoned them. Atyasrakshi. That's why Nachiketa, you are a Dhira Purusha. That is how Yama calls Nachiketa Dhir. Then what is the etymology of the term Dhira? We have to understand that also. So we will understand the concept of Dhira Purusha of Katha Upanishad. The etymology of the term Dhira is given as Dhyam Rati Dadati Grunhati Itiva. One who one who possesses Dhyam, Dhi, Buddhi, intellect, or he gives it to others, or he collects it, or he gathers it from his sadhana. that is dhira. The other definition, etymological definition of dhira is dhiyam irayati, one who is inspired by his, one who can inspire his intellect. Dhiyam irayati, and the meaning is given as dhairyanvitah, not just endowed with intellect, but he doesn't just possess the wealth of intellect, but it is coupled with courage, a lot of courage. Dhairya is associated always with the intellect of the dhira. So dhira has a perfect balance of buddhi and dhairya, intellect and courage. So he is a courageous man. Amarakosha, the Sanskrit lexicon of synonyms, gives many synonyms of the word dhira. Let us have a look at them. Amarakosha says Vidwan, Vipaschit, Doshajnaha, Sansudhihi, Kovido, Buddhaha, Dhiraha, Manishi, Jnaha, Pradnyaha, Sankhyavan, Panditaha, Kavihi. All these are the synonyms of the Dhir, word Dhir. So he is Vidwan, the means an intelligent person, learned person, and then Vipashchit, he is wise, he knows all the defects so that he can get over them. Then Sudhihi, he has got pure intellect. Kovidaha, he is an expert, he is a very wise person. Buddhaha, he is Manishi, means he has intuitive knowledge, not just worldly knowledge. He is intuitive. Jnaha, he is all knowing, so he is omniscient. Pradnyaha, his knowledge is very deep. Sankhyavan, he has discriminative knowledge. Panditaha, Kavihi, these are well known words. So, all these qualities are associated with the Dhira Purusha of the Upanishads. So, Nachiketa, being such a Dhira Purusha, represents all the seekers which are endowed with high intellect, a discriminative intellect, and of course the courage to follow the truth. Because seeking truth is not for the timid people. Seeking truth is not for cowards. Seeking truth is only for brave and courageous people. Only courageous people can approach truth, because truth is always veiled by so many other things, and it may the veils of truth may distract us from the pursuit of truth. So one has to have the courage to see through the veil of those things which cover the truth and though go within. So Dhira is a person who always searches beyond what is apparent, beyond what is explicit, beyond what is manifest, beyond what is gross. He looks into what is subtle. He will turn his back to all those things which are gross, which are impermanent, and he will go on looking for something eternal, and he will seek the supreme, the ultimate, unchangeable truth. That is the concept of dhira according to Upanishad. So, what does a dhira seek in Kathopanishad? According to Kathopanishad, Dhira seeks the Durdarsha, the inner truth which is Durdarsha, very difficult to comprehend, very difficult to find. Gudham, it is secret. And Anupravishtam, it is deep inside, it is not apparent. Guhahitam, in as if it is hidden in a cave. And Puranam, it is very ancient, very old. And then Dhira Purusha approaches it with Adhyatmadhi Yoga. Adhyatma Yogadhi Gamen. Kathopanishad says that one has to practice the Adhyatma Yoga, and then understanding, realizing that principle, that supreme divinity, which they call Deva, they don't give name to that Deva. The Upanishad says that Devam Matva Dhiraha Harsha Shoko Jahati. The Dhira Purusha transcends Harsha and Shoka, transcends pleasure and pain, transcends happiness and misery. So Harsha Shoka are representatives of all duels. So he transcends all vicissitudes of life. He transcends all the duels. That is the journey of a Dhira who seeks inside. What does he seek? Further, they say that ashariram sharireshu anavasteshu avasthitam mahantam vibhum atmanam matva dhiro na shochati. Društva, matva, all these verbs used in Kathopanishad are very important. Not just listening to it, not just reading, we can seek this inner truth. We have to see it with our inner eye. We have to contemplate on it, reflect on it, and we have to have experiential knowledge of that truth. Then only one can qualify to become a dhira. So, dhira transcends all, goes beyond all misery by finding the Atman, which is all pervading, which is great, supreme, and in spite of not having any body, he is bodiless. Still, he pervades all the bodies. And again, all the things, he sustains all the impermanent things by an eternal foundation of those unsustainable, unavastita things, but still he remains inside them. So that is the Atma Tattva that the Dhira has to see. And once he understands this, once he realizes this, na shochati, the fruit for him is given, clearly given. Na shochati, he never grieves. There is no sorrow, no misery in his life. Then how we have to proceed? Just listening about Dhira is not enough for us. We have to have some guideline to follow to become a Dhira. That is also pervaded, that is also offered, not pervaded, sorry, that is also offered by the Kathopanishad. Very beautifully, in a very famous mantra of Kathopanishad, the seer through Yama puts forth the tragedy of our human limited existence. In our limited human existence, we have been endowed with all sense organs, and with those sense organs, we have the perception of the external world. All our knowledge depends on our sense organs, what they provide us. Then, whatever data is provided to us, that will be processed by our buddhi, and then we will store knowledge within ourselves. But the first providers of our data are all our sense organs, and they are positioned in our body by the creator in such a way that they can see only outwards. Yama says, Paranchi Khani Vyatruna Swayambhu. The Creator has carved our sense organs in such a way that they paranch. They are paranchi, their faces are turned outwards, and only Kashchit Dhiraha, only some Dhira Purusha, only a Dhira Purusha can close those sense organs, and as the sense organs are turned outwards, we cannot see in. And tasmat parang pashyati. So the individual, the human person, sees out. The knowledge of external is lot of knowledge is there, but na antaratman. We cannot see antaratman, our inner self. Let aside the inner self. Without the help of technology, we cannot see what is happening inside our body, which is Sharira, which is Anavastita, but we cannot see inside our body. Every day, a lot of things go on in our body. We cannot see even those things. Our blood runs through our veins, our digestive systems are working, our lungs are pumping air in and out, our heart is pumping blood in and out, but we cannot see it with the sense organs that the Creator has given us, and we are proud of them that we have so many sensations. Our sensations are so fine that we can grasp everything, and we man is endowed with all these sense organs. So man is superior to other animals, no doubt. On material ground, it's true, but on spiritual level, these sense organs cannot turn inside and see what is happening inside. The highest truth that we are seeking in the form of the Atman is within us only. That's why it is called Pratyagatma in this Upanishad and in other Upanishads also. Pratyagatma, which is very close to us, the most close. Sense organs are Parancha, but Pratyagatma is Pratyak, close to us, within us. The closest thing to us is Paramatma, but we can't see the thing which is closest to us. So Dhira Purusha tries to look at it, tries to find it. And what does he do for that? He becomes Avrutta Chakshu. So being a Dhira becomes means the becoming an Avrutta Chakshu is the integral part of becoming a Dhira. What does the word Avrutta Chakshu means? Avrutta Chakshu means one who has closed his eyes, one who has closed his eye. Then why only eye? Because we have other sense organs also, through which our mind goes out and has various sensory perceptions, and we have knowledge of so many objects. Each sense organs has been allotted a different object, and that sense organ will grasp that object, and we will have the knowledge perception of that. Why only chakshu? Here, Chakshu represents all other sense organs. Shankaracharya in his commentary points out Avrutam means Vyavrutam Chakshuhu, Shrotradikam Indriya Jatam. All sense organs are represented here by Chakshu. Why Chakshu? Because it is quite common that Chakshu, our eyesight, is the first and primary source of our knowledge. Whatever we see things first sometimes and then have other perceptions about those things. Unless we see a beautiful flower, then only we can smell it. That is the common practice. It is not common for some visually impaired people and all that. There are exceptions, no doubt. But the prime source of our knowledge, material knowledge, is Chakshu. And yeah, all our other sense organs, Chakshu we can cover, but our ear we cannot cover. Our nose we cannot close, mouth we may keep shut for some time, but skin has covered all our body and we cannot control the sensation of touch that will come to our skin. So all other sense organs are very difficult to close and cover, but Chakshu is easy to cover, and that being our primary source of knowledge, Shankaracharya points out that Chakshu represents all other sense organs. Our eye represents all our sense organs. Why Chakshu Shabd is so important? As it is the primary source, and again in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad it is said that Chakshurvai Satyam. This expression we use, Chakshurvai Satyam. Why Chakshu is Satya? Why I is the truth? I is the finder of truth. Truth finder for us is I. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad gives a very commonplace support for this expression, Chakshurvai Satyam. What is that support? Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says that when two people are arguing amongst one another, Vivadamana, when they are fighting in each other, one says, no, no, I have heard this. And the other person says, no, I have seen it. Then whom do we believe? We believe into the person who says, I have seen it. So Chakshur Vaisat, therefore Chakshur Vaisatyam, Chakshu is the truth. That is what Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says us. We use Chakshur Vaisatyam as a single word in our languages, but that is a Upanishadic saying that we must understand. That Chakshur Vaisatyam, as Chakshu is the prime source of knowledge, but all the sense organ incomings from the sensory perceptions are to be stopped. How they are to be stopped? Mahata prayasena, Shankaracharya says, with great effort we have to become Avrutta Chakshu. Why great effort is required? Because Swabhava Pravrutti Nirodham Krutva, we have to obstruct or we have to annihilate or stop the arrest the natural tendency of the sense organs, because paranchikhani they have been made like this that they will go out to their objects, and that is their swabhava. God has created like that only. So their natural tendency, swabhava pravrutti, is to be arrested. Swabhava pravrutti nirodham krutva dhiraha pratyagatmanam pashyati, says Shankaracharya, and he says that he is mumukshu, he is the seeker of moksha. And what does this mumukshu dhiraha? He has added one more synonym to dhiraha. Shankaracharya has added mumukshu, one who is desirous of moksha. What does he does? All things which are non-conducive to Pratyagatma Darshan, to the vision or realization of Atman, he abandons them, he renounces them, and he rises above them. So he says, Pratyagatma Darshana Pratikulatvar Putra Vitta Lokeshanabhyaha Vittishtati. He rises above all the desires, like having a son, like having wealth, or having a good place in this world. So, in a way, he abandons what is related to Kama, that is Putra, what is related to Artha, that is Vitta, and what is related um, dharma, that is going to a superior region. All that desires pertaining to these three purusharthas he renounces, and he rises above them to have the vision of Atman. That is the way Dhira proceeds. And then the Dhira realizes that the only one principle, which is the foundation of Upanishadic philosophy, that Ekoham, the ultimate principle, is one. Or Ekam Sadvipraha Bahuda Vadanti, that Ek, though it is Ek, it doesn't remain singular, it doesn't remain alone. It appears through many forms. Kathopanishad has 4 or 5 very beautiful verses to describe this, and analogies are offered. How being one, ekam rupam bahudhaya karoti. Though one, he creates many forms for himself and he manifests himself through many forms. But dhira people, the dhira seekers, see it within themselves. Tam atmastham anupashyanti. They find it inside them, within them only. And the bliss that they get, tesham sukham shashvatam, is eternal. And those who are carried away by the multiplicity of manifestation, their happiness is not eternal. Tesham sukham shashvatam na itaresham, Kathopanishad warns us. Again, he says that thus the Antaratma who manifests himself in various forms, one who sees within himself finds a peace which is not comparable to any other peace. So he gets bliss, he gets peace, and that is what Dhira in Kathopanishad appears to be. We find the mention of Dhir in Mundakopanishad also, and similar concept is there in Mundakopanishad also. One who sees the Brahman, which is very subtle, fine, but everywhere, eternal and omnipresent, and one which has no limitations of sense organs like a human person has, that Bhuta Yonim from which everything is born, that is seen by Dhiraha. Only Dhiraha have the advantage, only Dhiras have the privilege of having the vision of that Bhuta Yoni, which is Avyaya, which is imperishable. And uh, in an individual, he is Manomayaha, Pranasharira Pratishtitaha Anne Hrudaye Sannidhaya. He lies within our heart only. Tad Vijnanena. The Dhira, according to Mundaka Upanishad, have Vijnana, have the special knowledge of that Antaratma, and he is in the form of Ananda and Amruta. So they, Dhira, seekers, see that Ananda Rupa Amruta Antaratma, and they become Jnanatruptaha, they become contented with the knowledge of that Atman. They have realized Atman. They have gone beyond all kinds of attachments, and Prashantaha, they have reached such a quietude, such a peace, that they have now reached the ultimate truth which is everywhere, and those Dhira also go beyond their own individual personality, and then Sarvameva Vishanti. They become Sarva. They become universal. Their universe becomes their own self. That is the description of Dhira in Upanishad. Again, at some other place, it is also a very famous saying that Dhira Purushaha, what do they do? That just like the blade of a grass, we can peel the layers of the grass. I'm not going into the original quotation. They peel the blades of grass one by one and reach the inner cores. In the same way, Dhira Purusha with Dhairya go seeking within by removing one by one the outer layers that cover the inner cores of our eternal existence. They are Dhira. So, in this way, the Dhiras that are described in the Upanishads, we can, in fine, summarize that they are the seekers following the path of knowledge. They are the seekers of the knowledge of Atman, and their path is the path of knowledge, and Mundakopanishad associates them with sannyasa. Kathopanishad says that they are the followers of Adhyatma Yoga, and Mundaka Upanishad says that they are followers of Sannyasa Yoga. So they are the seekers of knowledge. Theirs is a path of knowledge, and they don't have, in a way, if we say they don't have the support of anything to rely upon, like God or something, and so their path, as Kathopanishad says, is very difficult, like walking on the sharp edge of a sword or a razor. So their path is difficult, no doubt. But what they find ultimately at the end of their path as their destination is Anandamaya. Amrutamaya, Chidanandamaya, Atman. So they reach the immortality, the perfect bliss, and eternality in knowing Atman and becoming Atman. That is the concept of Dhira. Then the question came to my mind: has we do we find the reference of Dhira in other texts? Do we find the word Dhira or the Dhira Purusha in Bhagavad Gita? Surprisingly, the word Dhira is not there in Bhagavad Gita. Surely, the word Dhira is not there. But the concept of Dhira is very much there in Bhagavad Gita in the form of Sthita Prajna. We know the Sthita Prajna Varnana, the description of Sthita Prajna, the man who has steady wisdom, who has Sthita Dhihi, his intellect is steady, that person is very much close to the concept of Dhira in the Upanishads. It is said about Sthitaprajna that yada samharate chayam kurmonganiva sarvashah indriyani indriyarthebhyah tasya prajna pratishtitah. Sthitaprajna takes all his sense organs back like a tortoise, means the sense organs remain there on the human in the human person in the body, but just like a tortoise takes all his organs inside its shell and remains steady, not moving, like that the Sthita Prajna also takes away all the sense organs from their objects, and then he becomes Sthitadhihi. In Kathopanishad also, the before the person becomes Dhira, he has to practice Adhyatma Yoga. And what is that Adhyatma Yoga? In Kathopanishad also similar description is there. यदा पंचानि अवतिष्ठन्ते इंद्रियाणि मनसा सह ताम योगमिति मन्यन्ते स्थिराम इंद्रिय धारणाम. यदा पंचावतिष्ठन्ते, when five sense organs along with mind are held in full control, that steady position of an individual is called Adhyatma Yoga in Kathopanishad. So, controlling all external energies, turning one's gaze inside, and following the path of contemplation, having the courage to discern, because that Viveka, like Nirakshira Viveka, that power of discernment, that power of discrimination is the hallmark of the Dhira Purusha. And for that, he has to become Avrutta Chakshu. We find some references in Bhagavata Purana also about Dhira Purusha, and as Bhagavata Purana is um, the kernel of all bhakti doctrine. Um, it is a treatise, it is a scripture of Bhakti Marga. Here, Dhira is always associated with the practitioner of yoga. Yogi in Bhagavata Purana is Dhira, and sometimes he is said to be a sannyasi, a monk also, sannyasi, gruhat pravrajito, one who has left his home. But then um, in Bhagavata Purana, it is said that some people, some Dhira Purushaha, those Dhira Purushaha control Prakriti, which is very mighty. They control the mighty Prakriti, conquer it, and practice Atma Samadhi Yoga, which is closer to Patanjali Yoga Sutra. With this Atma Samadhi Yoga, the Dhira Purusha also reached God. That is the interpretation of course, Bhagavata Purana Bhakti Marga, where Nirguna Brahma is insignificant and Saguna, Lord Vishnu, is the ultimate truth. So even those Dhira also reach Lord Vishnu alone, but Tesham Shramaha Syat. For them, a lot of effort is required, which is not, the rigorous effort is not involved in your service, in your worship, in your seva. It is just joy and joy and joy. That is the attitude of Bhagavata Purana, that Dhira has to take a lot of effort. It is a rigorous, austere bath of penance and a lot of self control. So, that that is the way Bhagavad Purana looks at the Dhira as the practitioner of yoga and a person having very rigorous practice. But then, do we find such avrutta chakshu? I'm coming to the last part of uh, my speech. That do we find such avrutta chakshu dhiras in modern India or in medieval India or in ancient India itself? Do we find examples? Because Upanishads are scriptures. Their Nachiketa is example, and it is the ideal of Dhira. He is the ideal example of Dhira, no doubt. But for us, we need tangible ideals, tangible ideal examples of this concept of Avrutta Chakshu Dhira. The first that comes to my mind is Gautama Buddha. Gautama Buddha, Lord Buddha, before he became Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama in, uh, was born in 1623 BC. So he also belongs to antiquity. But still, the records of Gautama Buddha, the historical records of Gautama Buddhas are also available. So Gautama Buddha also went on, became a sannyasi, like Bhagavata Purana says. He left home Maha Vinishkramana or Mahapravrajya he took. But then finally he had he took a rigorous way of penance also, and the pictures of Buddha whose only skeletal is seen within his body are also very famous in Buddhist art. And Buddha himself has described his journey in Majjhima Nikaya, and then ultimately he sought many paths of finding the truth. But ultimately, when he sat under the tree, banyan tree, he was resolved. The resoluteness, the dhairya, courage, and resolve of the dhira entered in his mind. And he said, in Majjhima Nikaya says, though my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and my blood and flesh may dry up and wither away, yet I will not stir from this seat until I have attained full enlightenment. And he sat there, closing his eyes and then concentrating on finding the truth, and ultimately he got the enlightenment. There are stages of his enlightenment: first trance, second trance, third trance, fourth trance, and finally he reached the enlightenment which is called Bodhi. So he became the Buddha, enlightened one. Similar to Buddha, we are the followers of Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda also had a lot of spiritual practice, and with the grace of his Guru Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he had the vision of Pratyagatma, no doubt. But that was not enough. He got the vision of Pratyagatma, but his master had a different plan for him. He still needed to become more Avrutta Chakshu to find his own mission in this life. Just having the vision and glimpse of Pratyagatma and enjoying the love of Mother Kali was not enough. Something more was required, and for that, all of us we know that he went to Kanya. When he went to Kanyakumari, then he swam across the ocean filled with sharks because he had no money to pay the ferry. He went on the rock which is known as Shripada Shila. Every day, some people would go and worship there the footprints of Mother Goddess. But then Swamiji went there and sat there for 3 days in deep meditation. So, closing his eyes, and see how much peace he must have within himself, because the roaring sea and the strong gales of wind, and no one was there, and in solitude he sat there for 3 days. And that rock is compared to the Bodhi tree of Gautama Buddha by Eknath Ji Ranade, the founder of and the visionary of Vivekananda Rock Memorial and Vivekananda Kendra. So he became Avrutta Chakshu there, and all that was that he was seeking as his mission passed from his eyes, passed through his eyes. The glorious past of Bharat Mata, the pitiable condition, the wretched state of our people at his time, means that was the presence for him. And again, the emergence of glorious future, all that passed in his before his closed eyes. And that Avrutta Chakshu gave him a great insight and a great vision to work for his country. And then he has explained his mission in one of his letters to Swami Ramakrishnananda after his experience of Kanyakumari. After 1 year from America, he has written to Ramakrishnananda Swami and explained how he found his mission on the rock of Kanyakumari, because he could see the whole country, visualize the whole country standing on the tip of our country. He could see it, and this Avrutta Chakshu meditation opened his eyes, opened a path for him to serve the people, and he has very well and very eloquently explained it all through his literature. So the Avrutta Chakshudhira doesn't stop at the vision of the Pratyagatma, looking inside, looking within. Again, his eyes are opened, his inner vision is opened for the whole mankind, for the whole world, and he goes on serving the people. That is the extension of the Upanishadic concept of Dhira. And we find the same Avrutta Chakshu Dhira in Sri Aurobindo also, whose 150th birth anniversary we are celebrating this year. He was also a man of action, he was a revolutionary. But in the jail, when he was imprisoned for the Alipur bomb case, almost for 1 year he was imprisoned. But in that prison he had so many mystical spiritual visions. In one of his reminiscences, he says that he for 1 week he could see Vivekananda talking to him. He has written like that, he could see Swami Vivekananda talking to him. And then he had such a visions, a mystical vision, that he says that I could see Vasudeva everywhere. The jail and the tree and outside of my cell under which I walk is Vasudeva. And I feel that Vasudeva is holding his umbrella on my head for his shade. All the prison cell, everything now I see as Vasudeva, as Sri Krishna. He has narrated his experiences in his unique, uncomparable style. And that made him Avrutta Chakshu. He turned his back to all his political, social activities, and he became Avrutta Chakshu and remained Avrutta Chakshu, secluded from the people all all his life. Only some few occasions he came out and met people, but that was rare. But it was not that he closed himself from the humanity. He cut his bonds with humanity. His concentration, his focus now has turned inside, and he wrote so much. He created such a magnificent philosophy of integral yoga that people will need so many generations and so many years to understand and put into practice, because he could see his vision was far beyond the present situation of country. Vivekananda saw the present situation for his country and tried to visualize a glorious country, a glorious uh, universe which is based on the spiritual brotherhood. I don't call it universal brotherhood, it is a spiritual brotherhood, Vivekananda see. Uh, I may dare to say that Aurobindo looked even beyond that, and we are still grappling our way to find what Sri Aurobindo actually wanted us to do. And he wrote so much for the benefit of humanity. So he is the example of Avrutta Chakshu Dhiraha after Swami Vivekananda, maybe not far much removed, but 10 years gap, after 10 years gap, Rabindo came. So we have so many Avrutta Chakshu Dhiras over the flow of centuries, not centuries, millions of years in India. So that is not just a utopian ideal put in front of by Upanishads. It was practiced, put into practice by so many people for the benefit of us, for the benefit of the whole world, and therefore the faith of Swami Vivekananda that India is destined to become Jagat Guru will be realized through such Avrutta Chakshu people, which will still come in India, have come and will come in India. And for us, we are not that great. We are simple, common people. But at least for some time, we can become Avrutta Chakshu. We can turn our back to all our sensory perceptions, carnal desires and feelings, and at least for some time, we can become that resolute, courageous, wise, pure intellectual, whose intellectual is pure, not pure intellectual, whose intellectual pure dhira, at least for some fleeting moments in our life. I pray God that God may bless us with such capacity, such a desire to become Avrutta Chakshu Dhira in our day to day mundane life and fill our life with peace and bliss. Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lita Tai. It was wonderful listening to you and a very exhaustive coverage of the concept of Dhira throughout the scriptures, starting from Upanishad to Swami Vivekananda. Thank you so much. On behalf of Vivekananda Kendra Kanyakumari and Vivekananda Prabodhini Mumbai, I extend my wholehearted gratitude to you for this session.
Thank
Thank you.
you. It was